Have you ever stopped to think that sometimes the greatest wound doesn't come from a stranger, but from the one you love most? Joseph wasn't wounded by distant enemies. He was broken within his own home. Surrounded by his own brothers, instead of support, he found envy, hatred, and a calculated plan to destroy him. Genesis 37, verses 4-5. The pain was so profound that they went so far as to sell him into slavery, robbing him of his security, his dreams, and his place in the family. Psychologically, this reveals something universal. When someone stands out, receives different gifts or charisms, it can awaken envy, competition, and resentment even in the people who should protect them. But here's the point that almost no one sees amidst the pain. While Joseph was being sold, humiliated, and torn from his own story, God was already moving the pieces of a much greater purpose. What seemed like the end for a rejected young man would become the beginning of a plan that would save an entire nation. Genesis 37, 4-28. Joseph's story is not just about suffering, it's about purpose, resilience, and a radical trust in God even when everything seems unfair. Today, many people experience something similar. They feel betrayed, discarded, or underestimated by the very people from whom they expected acceptance. Psychologically, the pain of betrayal shakes one's identity, generates a feeling of abandonment, and can make a person believe they have no value. But the biblical narrative shows us something powerful. Adversity doesn't define your destiny. It reveals where your faith lies and prepares the ground for miracles you cannot yet see. Before we continue, take a sincere pause. In what area of your life do you feel like Joseph, betrayed, wronged, forgotten? Keep this in your heart because by the end of this video, you will realize that perhaps God is writing something much greater than the pain you see today. Joseph was sold by his brothers out of envy and jealousy. Genesis 37, verses 4-28. They couldn't bear to see the special love Jacob had for him, nor the dreams that pointed to a prominent future. Instead of celebrating what God was doing, they chose to compete with what they didn't understand. Psychologically, this reveals a deep human pattern. Constant comparison and a lack of humility generate rivalry, sabotage, and distance even among people who should be walking side by side. When the heart is not tended to, someone's success begins to be interpreted as a threat, not a blessing. The Bible makes it clear that God never lost control. He allowed the situation to happen not to destroy Joseph, but to test, refine, and strengthen his faith. Joseph could have hardened his heart, become bitter and vengeful, but he chose to maintain integrity and trust in God, even bearing the label of being betrayed. This teaches us that character is not proven in easy times, but in times of rejection. Taken to Egypt as a slave, Joseph faced a series of injustices. He was falsely accused, thrown into prison, and forgotten by those who had promised to help him. Genesis 39, verses 1-20. Each new blow seemed like a final point in his story. From a psychological standpoint, these experiences act as a kind of forced training in resilience. It is in this type of pain that we learn to regulate emotions, cope with frustration, and choose wiser responses instead of reacting impulsively. Instead of losing his sanity, Joseph learned to serve with excellence even in captivity. The Bible declares something key. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered. This shows that God's presence doesn't mean the absence of problems, it means strength, discernment, and direction in the midst of them. Adversity in this context is not a sign of abandonment, but a tool for preparation. When God's time comes, the same path that seemed marked by loss transforms into a gateway to authority. Joseph interprets dreams in the palace, is recognized for his wisdom, and becomes governor of Egypt. Genesis 41, verses 39-41. That rejected young man now manages resources that will save thousands of people, including his own brothers who betrayed him. Genesis 50, verse 20. Joseph's story is not just about suffering, it's about purpose, resilience, and a radical trust in God, even when everything seems unfair. The story of Joseph reminds us that adversity can be a surgical instrument of God to mold character and direction. He was wounded by the one he loved most, but he chose not to let that wound control his life. Genesis 37 verses 4 through 28. Psychologically, rejection and injustice are tests of patience, identity, and integrity. They reveal whether you will become a hostage to resentment or a partner in a greater purpose. The Bible shows God working behind the scenes, connecting circumstances that Joseph did not see, to transform humiliation into a platform. Every difficult situation we face can be just a preparatory chapter, not the end of the story. If you are in the midst of pain, it doesn't mean God is finished with you. It means He is building something in you. Joseph's suffering shows that God's presence doesn't eliminate the valley, but changes how we cross it. Genesis 39, 2 through 3. He didn't have all the immediate answers, but he had companionship every step of the way. From a psychological standpoint, trust in the face of injustice is what protects the mind from emotional collapse. Those who trust, even without understanding everything, suffer but do not crumble. They cry but do not completely lose their way. Spiritually, this teaches us that difficulty is not synonymous with a lack of calling. Often it is confirmation that you are being prepared for something greater. God does not waste tears. He transforms them into clarity, maturity, and authority to help others. Finally, Joseph shows us that God can transform the worst betrayal into the greatest bridge that leads to the greatest purpose. His brothers sold him, but he was the instrument God used to save the very people who had wronged him. Genesis 50 verse 20. Psychologically, this is proof of a healed mind, someone who doesn't get stuck in the victim role, but chooses to use the pain as building material for something greater. They don't deny what happened, they give it new meaning. Spiritually, we learn that nothing is wasted in God's hands. What seemed like the end becomes the beginning of a new kind of influence, more humble, wiser, and more like God's heart. If this story is already triggering memories of rejection, injustice, or neglect in your own life, don't just watch passively. Write somewhere, "My pain can also become a purpose." And if you want to take it a step further, check out the link in the description. There you'll find materials and reflections to transform wounds into growth instead of repeating cycles of resentment. The story of Joseph teaches us that not all injustice or betrayal is a sentence of defeat. In God, pain can become purpose, obstacle can become opportunity, and betrayal can be transformed into a blessing that reaches other people. Genesis 50 verse 20. Psychologically, this shows that the most important question is not, "Why did they do this to me?" but "What am I going to do with what they did to me?" Our response to adversity can push us towards bitterness or towards maturity. Look at your life now and be honest. Have you reacted to injustices with anger or with faith and patience? Joseph didn't remain stuck in the role of victim. He learned, grew, and became a key figure in the survival of many. The Bible shows that active faith, even in the midst of pain, produces results that go far beyond our immediate understanding. Genesis 41, 41 through 43. What seems to be hindering your progress may actually be opening space for something you are not yet ready to handle. Therefore, trust and align your choices with God. Instead of simply asking, "Why did this happen to me?" ask, "How can God redeem this in me?" Reflect, strengthen your character, and allow Him to transform your moments of pain into strength, sensitivity, and wisdom. Always remember the phrase that summarizes Joseph's journey. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Every adversity can become an eternal lesson when faced with faith, patience, and courage. And now, to wrap things up, leave a comment below. I choose to believe that God can transform my pain into purpose. If this message resonated with you, like this video, share it with someone who is going through a period of betrayal or rejection, and subscribe to the channel. Here, faith, mind, and wisdom walk together to help you interpret your story through God's lens, not just through the lens of pain.